So today is all about negotiating offers. Um, this is a class that usually for some people, um, well, I will start by asking you your thoughts on negotiation before I give you my thoughts. Um, but first of all, just kind of looking at where you're at, um, and where you've kind of worked your way through in Ignite. Um, you're coming to the end here. So you've talked about making and receiving offers. Now we're going to talk about negotiation, and then you're moving on to the close. So I'm curious if anyone kind of how you're feeling as you're getting near to the end of Ignite. If there's questions or challenges that are coming up just in general before we really jump into the negotiating offers. Nothing. Also, note, guys, when I've got my screen share like this, it's harder for me to see you. So if you're trying to get my attention and I'm not responding, just holler because I don't have the ability to see all of you at the same time, unfortunately, when I've got my screen share going for PowerPoint. So just holler. Okay. So if there's nothing on that, then let's keep working our way through. So, today, what we're focused on is negotiating offers. And one of the biggest things you're going to learn today are the 3Ps approach to negotiating offers. And you're going to have the opportunity today. We will be doing breakouts where you guys are going to be able to pair up and do some practice of this, because negotiation is one of the few things that really can set you apart in this business. And so practicing it and understanding it and getting excellent at it, really crucial. So let me ask you, just so I make sure we cover everything, are there any specific questions today about negotiation in general? No, you guys are just all here to check the box and say we took the class?
No, actually, I have one.
Okay.
And this is more of like I guess you're going to get to it, so that's why I didn't speak up. But I'm not really good with the back and forth part of negotiation. It's more of a here's where I'm drawing the line in the sand, take it
Okay.
or leave it kind of thing. It's at least that's how I am with negotiating, and so I don't know how to
Okay. Cool.
learn how to um do the where to start and where to how
Okay.
to incrementally, I guess is the word, go down.
Yeah. And I would say that a lot of people have that. It's sort of like, this is my line in the sand, I'm not budging. Or there tends to be the other side where it's like, oh, I'll just give it all away. And it's like, how do I get in that kind of happy medium? So no, that's valid. And we will, and I'll spend a little bit more time on that, knowing that it's something that you're, feeling kind of like, how do I get better at that? What else? Anything else specific to negotiation that you guys want to learn about? So how about this when you see this quote? Negotiating is not something to be avoided or feared. It's an everyday part of life. Does that resonate? So think about, a lot of times I hear, well, we don't really negotiate in real estate, which always kind of worries me because it's exactly what we do. Um, or people say I'm not good at negotiations. I've never done it before. So I challenge you to be kind of thinking of where are times. Okay, first of all, if you have children, you negotiate on a daily basis. And you can learn a lot from the tactics that your children use on you, because kids are master negotiators. If we kept that skill all the way through to adulthood, wow. Um, so think of it that way, or think about, most of us at some point have gone in and negotiated for a new car. Now, there's two things I'll say about that. Think about that from the standpoint of when you go in to buy a car, what is the thing that most people say? Oh my God, I don't want to deal with the salesperson. Anything but that. So that is a sign of negotiation strategies that, while effective, they also are a total turnoff. So as you're thinking about negotiation and going, how do I, for me personally, make negotiation feel good and positive? How do I make it a win and positive for everybody involved so that people don't go, oh my God, I have to deal with that agent. I don't want to deal with them. And be thinking about one of the things, the longer you're in sales and the longer you're doing this, whenever you're in a sales situation, watch the techniques that are being used. I own a timeshare, and almost every time we go, they're like, oh, sit through the owner update, blah, 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 so we can sell you. I sit through them not because I think I'm going to buy more or do more. I sit through them twofold. One, they usually give me something that's worth an hour of my time, but also I like to see the strategies that are being used. I like to see the closes they're using. I like to learn from it. Because timeshare sales, that's a pretty hardcore industry to be selling it. So they have to be good at sales or they don't survive. So be looking for those, because it helps you learn how to negotiate better by being in those situations and being negotiated with. Any other thoughts on this quote before we keep on keeping on? Okay. So one of the things to be aware of, we talk about what is negotiation. In the NAR studies, one of the top things usually in the top like 3 almost every time is people wanting to, hang on, I got somebody trying to get into the room. There we go. One of the top things people want is somebody who can negotiate on their behalf. So if you're not somebody who likes the idea of negotiation, I recommend getting comfortable with it, because it's what people want from us. It's one of the, as I said earlier, it's one of the things that differentiates us from other agents and also still makes us an integral part of the transaction. There are a lot of ways that realtors can be replaced. The negotiation piece and the client connection and human connection are 2 of the things that, unless AI gets really crazy good, we can't be replaced in those spots. Now, that means, though, that there's a strong likelihood that the people who are best at those things are going to be the people who get the lion's share of the business. So this is one of those things to really be thinking about and practicing. Did somebody, I just heard, okay. All right. So because negotiation is a sorry, I heard the background noise and I got distracted. Because it's a back and forth and it's a bargaining process, it means we're interacting with other people, which is why we bring up the Y4C2Ts. Hopefully you guys are all getting very familiar with the Y4C2Ts. However, this is another thing that differentiates us at Keller Williams, because we live by this creed. So I would be curious, when you're looking at the Y4C2Ts, what ones do you think really relate back to the negotiation process? I promise I can wait you guys out, so you might as well answer.
I'd say win-win and communication.
Definitely. Big ones. What else?
I think the 2 that really stick out loudly for me is teamwork and trust.
Okay. Yeah. What else? Anything else up there? So in some ways, I would argue it's a trick question, because I think every single one of these comes into play. I think you guys hit on the ones that really stand out, though. The other one for me, and it's also the one for me that is the most important, is integrity. I think also in this, remembering customers always come first. That for me is, remember, this is not your transaction. You are facilitating a transaction. You have a buyer and a seller. They are the customers, and what they want comes before anything that we want. It's one of the things, that's why sometimes it's hard when you're like, I haven't had a closing in a while. And if this doesn't go through, I don't know how I'm going to pay my mortgage. That makes it very hard to be like, well, I got to put my customer first and they're wanting out of this deal. But if they cancel, I can't pay my mortgage. So remembering ultimately, you got to do what's right by the customer first. So, and the other thing to remember, I would say that comes up in this, and it plays into kind of all of these, it sort of weaves its way through, is remembering that this is a negotiation. The person who keeps their cool and stays the most level-headed and even-keeled will win the game. So when you start to feel defensive or whiny or victimy, that's the time for you to go have a conversation with yourself or your coach or an agent who's a friend and get yourself out of it. It is not the time to be having a conversation with another agent that you're in negotiations with. And it is not the time to go to your client and go, oh my God, do you know what Susie Q did? I cannot believe this. She's saying her sellers won't do this, blah, blah. That just raises the drama level. One of the things we do is we calm everything down. So that goes into communication seek first to understand. Because oftentimes we take things out of context, especially with text and email. And so we immediately are like, oh, they need this. And we start going down this rabbit hole when really, if we'd taken the time to stop and communicate and get clarity, oftentimes you're closer to where you thought you actually were, just by getting more clarity and asking more questions. And so remember that, and remember also everybody in here wants something. The buyers and sellers each have a desire to sell and buy a home for a transaction to occur. So do the agents. There's also underlying currents for each person involved that has to do why the house is being sold, why the house is being bought, whatever's going on in your life, whatever's going on in that agent's life, whatever's going on in the lender's life, and quite frankly, whatever's going on in the title officer's life. So you've got all these human beings. Remembering to have some grace and to try and come from a place of, if I can stay level-headed, I can keep everybody kind of going in that direction. And I kind of harp on that, but it is the number one thing that I would say new agents, not even just new agents, but more definitely new agents, we get emotionally involved. This is not about you. This is business. You care about your clients. The best thing you can do for your clients is to stay as unemotional as possible in the transaction. The second you start talking about we want this, or my client wants this, you don't own your client and you don't want anything. There is no we. There's a buyer, a seller, and then the agents. So it is always the client, the buyer. You know, my sometimes comes into play, but remember, sometimes when you get that, you're starting to get too much in the, like, my child, like, this is the person I am protecting. Your job is to protect them, but they are autonomous adults that can do their own things. So remembering that, and remembering that you are facilitating, you aren't actually in the transaction. It makes such a difference. Any questions on any of that?
So what word would you use instead of my client or we?
I would say, the buyers are trying to keep, when you're talking with another agent, anything you can do that kind of just keeps it very business-like. The more it gets into, and agents like to do this, we like to kind of buddy up, and we like to kind of buddy up sometimes agents even buddy up against their clients, which, but oftentimes we're buddying up with our clients against the other agent or vice versa. So the more we're able to go, hey, I'm not party to this. My number one job is to stay unemotional so that I can calm the situation down. There's a reason why we do not put buyers and sellers in the same room to negotiate. Now, there are times where that would solve a lot of problems. The majority of it is because you've got two people that this is one, or two sets of people that this is one of the biggest things they ever do in their life. Very few of us ever make a purchase that's larger than the home we live in. There are very few things that we are as emotionally tied to that are inanimate objects. Like I would say there's probably nothing than our home. Our home represents so much to us. So there's going to be emotions with your clients. If you jump in the sandbox with them, now we've got a whole bunch of people with emotions versus two people who are staying above the emotions and being the voice of reason and the calming voice with our individual clients and with each other. If you can't do it and manage your client, or you can't manage yourself with the other agent, or the other agent can't manage themselves or manage their client, that makes the whole thing much harder. If you stay in your lane, you go, my job is to keep my clients calm and to let them know we're going to work through any challenges and to keep myself calm. That's really all you have control over. You can't control the other agent. You can't control their clients. There are times, sometimes, depending on the other agent, sometimes they are open to at least hearing something from you in terms of, hey, I've had a client that was like that before. Here's what I tried. Just because sometimes they're like, I don't know what to do. This client's shooting themselves in the foot. And we're all looking at going, they're going to kill a deal over $1,000. It's an $800,000 sale and it's going to fall apart over $1,000. Like, that's not logical. It's emotional. It's that, Corey, like you were saying, I've given my last dime and I am not going to give this additional dollar more. And you're like, you're going to lose out on an $800,000 sale over $1? Come on. And then what a lot of agents do is they go, oh, well, I'll jump in and cover that. First of all, don't get in the habit of jumping in and fixing your client's problems with your commission. It's a bad business model. If they want to blow the deal, let them blow the deal. Now, if you screw up, yes, then you jump in and you cover it. But don't start, I don't recommend it. For one, if you do it for one person and then they refer you to another, part of that referral is, hey, you know, if things go sideways, Jen's going to jump in and cover things. No, I'm not. I did it in that one deal because I needed to make my mortgage payment. So, yeah, you see what I'm saying? If you keep it very professional and very business-like, it removes some of the murkiness of communications. And I love this slide because I wish option one always happened. Yay, offer accepted, close, woo, if only. Now, that is what the public thinks we do. And then they go, why do you get paid so much? Option two is much more the way things work. So we're looking at, and then the other thing that it doesn't have that I would argue is a missing part of Ignite in this class is right after that negotiation, there's typically another negotiation. So you're going to make your offer. You're either going to get rejected. You might get accepted, but let's assume you're going to get rejected or countered. You're going to go back through that negotiation wheel until you get an accepted offer, or if you just get completely rejected and you move on. But assuming you get that accepted offer, what I always explain is there's two major negotiation periods. There's getting into contract and there's negotiation after inspections. And I would argue that the negotiation after inspections is more important and where we earn our value even more than the getting into contract. Getting into contract, we don't know as much about the property. It's in some ways easier just to get to that point. Then when you're having to negotiate on repairs, it's a whole different can of worms. But again, what you don't want is at any point to lose out because you don't have the strong negotiation skills. Any questions on the kind of negotiation process? Okay. So you negotiate with, I've already kind of gone through this, but we've got our clients and we've got the agent on the other side of the transaction. Notice in this picture, the buyer is not negotiating with the seller, nor is the buyer's agent negotiating with the seller. We don't cross those lines. And unfortunately, with clients, kind of letting them know that there's a reason for that and explaining it so they don't try and go around you is a good thing. Because that can get, if clients start talking, then you've got multiple people trying to negotiate in different directions and it can get really confusing. Um, the other thing to know is you negotiate with your clients at different points. We're talking about negotiating with them in the transaction, but before you even get to a transaction, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, you've negotiated with them to get them into contract with you. So as you can see, every step along the way, we are negotiating. The other thing I would say to remember with negotiation is your reputation precedes you. There's probably nothing more valuable to you in this industry than your reputation, not just with your clients, but with other agents. Because if I have 3 agents and they all bring offers on a listing, and one of them I've never done business with, I've never spoken to them, they didn't bother to contact me and ask any questions about the property. Well, they're a totally unknown entity for me. And I also, at this point, am not feeling a whole lot of respect that they didn't even call me before they submit an offer. Then I've got another agent that I've done a transaction with. It went beautifully. Everything went smoothly. We worked great together. And then I've got another agent that, oh my God, I've done one transaction with them. It was one of the worst ones in my 22 years of being an agent. Their offers are all pretty similar. Which one do you think I'm going to be saying to my sellers, hey, this agent I have a track record with, they're solid. This agent I have a track record with, and oh my God, worst deal I've ever done. And this agent I just don't know much about. Who do you think they're going to lean towards? Who am I leaning towards? So remembering that, because if you're the guy or the gal that was the jerk that I did a bit transaction with, people, they will forget if you're kind of neutral. They may not remember you in that. They will remember if you were great. They will remember if you were terrible, and it will stick with you. I can go back and tell you about agents I did transactions with in like my first 5 years in the business that I still go, their name comes up and I'm just like, oh, you don't want to be that person. You want to be the one that when an agent gets their offer, they're like, yes, I can't wait to do another transaction with this person. We work well together and we make stuff happen for our clients. So remember that. Common points of negotiation. So price is one that we typically, okay, price. And we often think it usually is the primary factor, but it is not the only thing. And there are times where the price is actually the seller's least critical piece. They've got other things that are important. You know, and some of those things, they can be financial. A lot of times it can be time-based. So for both sides, there's more than just, oh, they're asking 500,000, we'll offer them 500,000, yay, negotiations are done. What's important to your buyer and what's important to that seller? So tell me some of the things that you think besides price you would be negotiating on when you're making an offer on a house.
Whether the roof or gets fixed or buy a new fridge or like little intangibles like that.
Mm-hmm. That's some of the stuff for like the fridge, personal property that's going to be included that or not included. What else? What are some other things?
I think of contingencies.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Either adding more or removing them, shorter,
Mm-hmm.
longer. Mm-hmm.
Or this for that. So maybe there's a carpet allowance rather than a contingency is for you to replace all the flooring.
Yep. Some other ones that can be in there are things like rent backs, appraisal, whether you waive it or you're willing to cover some of it if it doesn't come in, the earnest money amount, home warranties. So this is why when we talk about, closing dates, this is why when we talk about negotiation, there's so much more than the price, which is why both with, if you're representing the buyer and the way this class is structured, we kind of are looking at it from the buyer's agent side of things. I try and bring in both sides so that you kind of understand how a listing agent perceives things as well. But so knowing if you're representing your buyer, what really are the important things to them? And if you're representing the seller, what really are their important things? And that comes up even like when you're negotiating on repairs. If they've got 10 things they want on the repair addendum, they might get all of them. They probably aren't. So telling them and saying, hey, we're going to ask for all this. I need you, if you don't know right now, I need you to be thinking, what are your things that are, no matter what, like I am willing to walk away. Like I can give up items 3, 7, 9, and 10, but the other ones, if they don't do them, I don't want the house. Like they need to be thinking that, and you need to understand that, because you're always going to negotiate for everything they want. But if there comes a point of needing to kind of quid pro quo and get down to the heart of the matter, that's when you need to know what your buyer is willing to leave on the table and what they're willing to walk away.
Oh, okay.
So the more you've had those conversations with them, and sometimes you get buyers will get them, well, I want all of it. Okay. That's also then when you kind of can go back and say, look at this from the seller standpoint, or if it's the seller, look at it from the buyer standpoint and try and have them see it in a different light. You're not always going to be able to do that, but that's now we're in the negotiations with our client. We're not in the negotiations on the other side, but we're having them try and kind of think through, well, A, what's important, and B, think about that win-win. So the best way, for a multitude of reasons, the best way to know what's important in your offer is to ask the other agent. Do not just send an offer. Absolute pet peeve of mine. Offer deadline date. You've got offers that people have been checking in, or they've emailed and asked a few questions or whatnot. Those offers come in, and then there's these random offers. And you're like, I know nothing about this person. They haven't bothered to check in and find out if we have any offers, what's important to my client, nothing. Now, the flip side, don't be the pest who calls the listing agent 500 times. So you get, to me, client wants to make an offer. That is one well thought out email or text or phone call, depending on what their preferred method is. Usually for me, I email unless I think there's a real time crunch. If there's a real time crunch, then I'm typically going to email my questions, and then I'll send a text and say, hey, I just sent you an email about 123 Main Street. I have some questions. We want to submit an offer. I didn't want to text them to you or bug you with a phone call. Can you check your email and just respond when you have a moment? But the biggest question is, what's important to the seller besides price? And then shut up and let them talk. Here's the other thing about negotiations. The person who talks less, listens more, will win the game. And you'll find out the people who are the hardest to negotiate are the ones who kind of come in like a bull in the china shop, and they will talk and talk and talk and talk and push on you, and it's like, okay, I'm just going to sit back. The other thing is you can't argue unless you take the bait and step into an argument. So if they want to be argumentative, the only way they win is if you jump in the sandbox with them. Don't jump in the sandbox. And if you can't stay out of the sandbox, remove yourself from the call. Just say, hey, it seems like we're not, like, it might be good just to take a break. Let's take a little bit of time. You think about what we talked about. I'll think about it. And then let's circle back. Because otherwise it just continues to escalate. And unfortunately, there are some people in real estate who are just kind of bullies when it comes to negotiation. And there's not a lot you can do about that other than tolerate them and then hopefully not get another transaction with them. So just know that sometimes it's like, wow, this person's just not nice. And again, remembering, we never know what's happening on the other side. Think about times where somebody has called you, and because maybe you haven't had this happen, but I have. You get on a call with somebody and you are having a bad day, and they say one little thing, one little way, and that's your ability. That is your way to jump at it and take out what's happening over here on them. We all have those times. So trying to come from a place of, I don't know what happened. They could have just found out that they had cancer today and they're trying to negotiate on behalf of their client. So coming from a place of assuming good until proven otherwise will help you a lot in negotiations. Not just in real estate, but with everyone. Um, all right. So that's kind of the start of what is negotiation and why is it important. Give me a couple ahas or any questions that come up from that section.
I think one of the things that really kind of resonated with me is I feel like I'm pretty good at negotiations. I was kind of smiling and nodding my head because a lot of what you said I've employed in my past life. And so it's like, yep, that's exactly right. But um I started like just blotting down a list of things that we've talked about, or actually you've talked about, and I've really absorbed are some of the things that bring value to the table for me. As a new realtor, you get the question, well, what value do you bring? Well, I don't know. So being
And
able to,
I love that you're saying your past life. Each one of you has a past life, and there are skills you bring into this business. So when you think that, catch yourself and go, wait a minute, I have skills, and here's how they apply to real estate.
Yeah, because the transferability of them. But when you're put on the spot, that question of, well, what value do you bring? I don't know yet. So going through.
So my recommendation, take a list. In your past life, what are the things that you were excellent at? And then go, okay. And here's because this is the one I get the most and it makes me insane, is stay-at-home moms who are getting back into the workforce and becoming realtors. And they'll be like, I don't know, I haven't worked in 15 years. Yeah, you have.
Exactly. Their worth is a lot more than most people out there.
Exactly. Yeah. And so how does that apply? And let me tell you, if you're dealing with toddlers at home, you have a lot of skills that apply in real estate because there's a lot of toddlerness that goes on in real estate. So remembering
you're not wrong.
that you're seeing it that way and thinking that way, because the more you practice that now and you've made that list, then when somebody asks, you're like, oh, let me tell you why I'm awesome.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really helps with negotiation too is, and if you're not good at this, practice it often, is active listening. Some people will say something and they're very direct with, no, I'm saying what I mean. Most people aren't. They hide behind some words. Body language can come into play, tone of voice can come into play if you're on the phone with them. So really active listening and diving into what's behind what's being said can really help you in the process of negotiation, because you can zone in on what's really important. Just like you said about, maybe they just found out they have a debilitating disease that you don't know, but that coming from that level of empathy and compassion and active listening, you're going to be able to figure out that something else is going on, and you can get to the root of whatever's in between you to have that positive negotiation to make it work well for everybody.
Yes. And think about times when, maybe you weren't at your best and someone gave you some grace, and whether or not you acknowledge it directly to them, somewhere in you, we usually acknowledge and go, I was not at my best. I was not the nicest human being in that conversation. And they took it and didn't call me out on it and didn't turn into a jerk back to me. How much I appreciate that. I would argue then being able to go back and say, hey, I was on a call with you yesterday talking about repairs. I'd had a really bad day and I apologize. I kind of probably came across like the ability to say I'm sorry, or even if you're not sorry, but to acknowledge when you've made a mistake. Huge. But active listening, there's not a skill, and it is a taught skill. It is a learned skill. It is giving people that pause afterwards to make sure that they're complete. So I love that you brought that up. What else? What other ahas?
Well, kind of piggybacking on that, number one, I have a 2-year-old, so I know exactly what you mean. and then number two, I'm coming to this from teaching. I took a couple of years off to be a stay-at-home dad, but I'm coming into this from teaching. So this is going to sound awful the way I say this, but with kids, it's easy because you can either say to them, hey, look, here's how this works. Or with my 2-year-old, I can just walk away. He'll throw a tantrum and then I'll go back and he'll be level-headed. But I think about some parents that I've had to deal with as a teacher, and adults are actually harder to deal with. They'll throw a tantrum and then they'll go and tell everybody how awful you are and don't ever have your kid in Mr. B's class and blah, 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 and so I guess I'm a little bit worried still because, obviously we're going to be dealing with I presume adults are going to be the ones buying houses. So
well, they're at least of a certain age, whether or not they're adults, who knows? But yeah. I will tell you, first of all, teachers and nurses are two of the prior professions that I see do the best in real estate. And I think that's a couple things. One, in both professions, you have to be able to see the big picture and be able to troubleshoot, triage, whether it's legit triage and, and so you're better at that than a lot of people. And you deal with so many different personalities and need to be able to calm a situation. So those skills, first of all, transfer brilliantly. From the standpoint of, kids in general are easier because we're able to exert power over them. That's not negotiation. That's just, I have more authority here, therefore I can tell you yes or no. And this isn't really a democracy. It's a little bit more of a dictatorship. With adults, though, adults have temper tantrums, and you can walk away from an adult temper tantrum the same way you do with a child. Usually you acknowledge it and say, hey, I understand, this is kind of going on here. Even if you don't need a break, if they're the ones who need it, you can say, I need a break. This is getting to be a bit much for me. I don't want this to go in a direction that doesn't work for anyone. So let's take a cooling off. I'll give you a call in a few hours, or we'll talk tomorrow, depending on, sometimes there's not a lot of time for that, but still, even that break in them having somebody go, wait a minute, this is too much. Sometimes that alone will snap somebody out of it, and they'll kind of go, oh, wait a minute, I was being kind of a jerk. I'm sorry. Or sometimes you catch yourself. You're like, I can tell I'm getting more and more to that boiling point and I'm going to lose my cool. And I don't want to do that. So you just say, look, I can tell I'm getting more and more like intense here. I need to just take a break and kind of regroup. Give me 15 minutes and I'll call you back. There's nothing wrong with that. I would much rather have you do that than have you lose your cool or have the other side lose their cool. So a lot of the same tactics, and you're right. There are some people who just aren't going to like you. You will have clients that you cross the finish line with, and you're like, thank God I never have to speak to this human being again. Hopefully they're few and far between. Like, I'm thinking my clients, I think I have 2 clients in 22 years that I feel that way about. So like, if I saw their name come up on my phone, I would be like, there's no way I'm picking that up. I'm going to change my phone number so you don't have it. One of them was very early on in my first year and like made me cry, called me a liar, like horrible. And fortunately I had a team around me that all had, my title rep and my lender both had 18 years in the business. And they were like, no, she's a nightmare. It's not you. So that sometimes is helpful too. If you're just like, why is this going this way? Running it by somebody and just going, this is what's happening. And I'm missing an angle here because this person is just impossible to deal with. And it's hard when it's your client. If you're under contract with the client and this is going on, that is the hardest negotiation of any negotiation in this business, is when you get into an adversarial situation with your client. And fortunately, it doesn't happen that often, especially if you learn a lot of these techniques. And sometimes it does. And so just knowing I have the right, just like you have the right in any relationship, to say, I need a break. That is your right. And that is a full stop. And you can say it. And if they don't want to hear it, then my response is, if I'm on the phone, is say, hey, I understand you want to keep talking. I'm telling you, I need a break. I'm going to get off the call now. Here's when I will reach back out. So anytime you take a break, this is in any relationship, guys, if you're taking a break from a situation, you have to let the person know when you're going to step back in, because otherwise they get left hanging with everything they're dealing with and no outlet. If they know I'm taking a break, I'm going to call you back tomorrow. That gives us tonight to kind of think it over, or I'll call you back in an hour. Then you've done everything. It's not your job to take care of them beyond that. And if they don't like you, there'll be enough people that do. So just know that. Yeah. What else? Any other ahas or questions from the first part? Okay, we will keep cruising. All right, so we're going to talk about the 3 P's of negotiations. Prepare, present, and position. And if you try and say that 3 times real fast, you will end up stumbling over your words. So kind of, it's very clear, but prepare. This is getting ready to go into the negotiation process. And this is what helps you stay confident, feel strong, and help, keep things smooth. Present, that's when you're actually getting into the point of presenting your offer. And then position, that is more of the, kind of strategic navigation to get to that end result. So we'll go into, each one of these in depth, but those are the 3 magical P's. All right. So prepare. First of all, you have to know your goal. Like, what does a win-win look like here? That comes from understanding your client's motivation for what they're doing. If you don't know your buyer's motivation or your seller's motivation, and if they're not crystal clear on it, you will have trouble. The first thing with agents that I coach, when they're like, got the seller, I can't get them to budge, we need to do something, my first thing is, well, what's their motivation? Now, if the agent can't answer it, we have a real problem. Or if their motivation is wishy-washy. Had one today, an experienced agent that I coach, and that was exactly it. She's like, they're getting divorced. That's a motivation. Unfortunately, the person who's still living in the house does not want to get the divorce. So anything that can be done to sabotage that becomes a problem. So we don't have a clear goal here. And I said, you've got to get to that clear goal that everyone's moving towards. If the attorneys have to get involved, get them involved. But you can't, if you don't have number 1 done, the rest of the negotiations aren't going to go anywhere. Know your client. So again, that comes back to when I was talking about throughout the negotiation, what is most important to them. They're going to have a list of things, but what are the things that they can't live without? Also trying to understand what the other side may want or be asking for, or if you know that you're asking for something that probably is a little bit outside the norm, is that something that you can kind of pre-plan? I'm doing this. I think they're probably going to do this. And if they do this, then I'm going to respond with this. That way you're not caught off guard. And the more you kind of play through various scenarios in your head, the more you're prepared for anything that comes your way. It's one of the things why role-playing negotiations is really, I think it's one of the funnest things to do, because you can also get really like, initially you kind of do it a little easier, and then you start to get to be the difficult client. So you learn how to kind of bob and weave and pivot by doing that. Think ahead. That really kind of ties in with what I was saying about what do you think they're going to want to get out of the negotiation. Set clear expectations. If your client is making an offer that probably is going to be countered, letting them know that so that they don't, not that it definitely is, but there's a strong likelihood, so they're prepared for that. Letting them know that moving quickly is important. I would say that's one of the biggest things with buyers. You can't, letting them know, I know you want to think on it. And in this market, and sometimes they'll say, oh, well, the house has been on 60 days. Yeah, well, guess what? Sometimes a house sits on the market for 60 days and on day 61, 4 offers come in. So once you know it's the house, then we've got to move in. And that's then also, this sets it back to, this is why you need to be pre-approved. This is why we do a buyer consult. So all this information is covered up front. If not, you're playing catch up the entire way through. It's why a buyer consult is so critical to success. Be informed. So this is, again, talking with the other agent and finding out what's going on, talking with other agents that have had listings in an area, if it's an area that you're not super familiar with, or sometimes, especially if it's a higher end purchase price, it's harder to compare apples to apples. So reaching out and talking to some of the agents who have either listed or sold houses that you're looking at as comps to see, am I really comparing apples to apples? That will help you in your negotiations. For one, if the listing agent has done their job, they know those properties and they know how to tell you why theirs is better. You need to know how to tell them why theirs is better or worse or whatever it actually is. The person who has done their homework wins the game almost every time. And this is an even playing field. This preparation part, this has nothing to do with whether you've been in the business a day or 100 years. This everyone can do. And here's a tip. Oftentimes, experienced agents start to get lazier about this part because we can wing it better than you can. So that's where you can be an experienced agent, because they're going to potentially be winging it or not have done all their homework. You've done all your homework. You know more than they do. So, obey the laws. That's kind of a... Please don't break the law. If you have questions about the law, you've got plenty of us around to answer those questions. Here's the other one. Know the documents inside and out. Huge one. One thing I will tell you guys is the training that you get at KW and at Experience Brokerage Network, most of you are going to have more training than other agents get in their entire career. Scary, I know. And accurate. As you all know, the day you passed the test and got your fingerprints and then hung your license, legally you can sell real estate. You never have to take another training class in your life other than continuing education, which is about as useful as the classes you took to get your license in the first place. You know nothing about the contract. Usually you've never seen one. You know nothing about how to get clients. You know nothing about, you don't know anything. And people go out and start selling and they never had the training. The contracts, and the person who knows the contracts the best wins the game. Once you know your contracts well, you will be in negotiations and you will have people tell you things that you're just like, your job is to know this contract and you don't even know what you're saying, and it is completely factually incorrect. And I have it all the time where new agents will call and they'll be like, this agent's telling me this is what this means, and I don't think this is what it means. You said it means that. I'm like, and that's what it means. That other agent needs to come take some classes. And that's hard for new agents. When you know an experienced agent is wrong, it is harder to say, I'm a few months into the business and I know you've been doing this 10 years, but you're wrong. That is not what the contract says. And if you know your contract, you'll be confident enough to go, no, it's line 143 right there. That's what that means. And then you hear the other side. They do one of two things. They either dig in deeper and they double down and really look stupid, or they go, oh, you're right. I never really read that line of the contract. Have some grace for them and say, yeah, I know. I got hammered on a contract at some point, whether you did or not. And so I decided I was going to make my job to know every line of the contract. But the person who knows the documents wins the game. Any questions on preparing? Okay. All right. Ask purposeful questions. One of the bold laws is clarity is power. And the only way you can get clarity is through asking questions. So by asking those questions, now I know what the key points are that I'm going to negotiate on, because I know what's important to my client. I also have asked, so I know what's important to the seller. By asking those questions, I start to understand better where what the seller needs and the buyer can give match up, so I can use those as tipping points, and where they're not aligned. And so I know that's going to be more of the sticking point. So I can look at how do I sweeten things in places that will work for the other side, but doesn't give away what my client is most important to them. Anytime you can walk away, we talk about win-win. The best win-win is where each side actually walks away feeling like they won. Not, oh, well, I did okay. But if they're like, wow, gee, they're happy and I did way better. So that's how you get there, is by understanding what you can leverage on. Sets clear expectations, asking the right questions, and then being able to give appropriate feedback to that allows the expectations to be clear for everybody involved. It allows you to get to know your client and their goal. And then, like I said, it helps with the win-win negotiation. And that really is ultimately what we're looking for. And without knowing what win-win looks like, and here's the thing, a lot of times people don't know. So asking them, totally cool. All right, we're going to go. Like, what does win-win look like in this situation? Go, I don't even know what you mean. Well, you're not going to get everything you want. The seller's not going to get everything they want. But how do we find that spot where everyone walks away feeling like, well, I would have liked another piece of steak for dinner, but that was a hearty meal and I'm still happy and content. I'm not leaving the table hungry. There's a difference between that and, yes, and I had 5 desserts and so I got everything I ever wanted. You know, what can you walk away and feel really good about? The questions and going deeper with those is what helps with that. And then we talk about open versus closed questions. Open-ended questions cause more discussion. They bring out, they're the questions that you ask and then you just sit back and you listen and you listen. And rather than going, oh, they said that, I want to ask, maybe you make a little note so that you can circle back. When they're answering a question, do your very best not to interrupt them. They will tell you things that you didn't even know to ask. And I will tell you, as a buyer's agent, when you call a listing agent, if you ask solid, open-ended questions and then you sit back, the average listing agent will tell you more than they ever should have. That will help you negotiate on behalf of your client. Not all of them. Some of them are savvy enough to just kind of answer the question, give you the information, not give you these other details that can then open the door for you to use them in the negotiations. And buyer's agents do it too, because they want the seller to pick their clients. So like, well, I'll tell them all the stuff about my client. Well, now that can be used against your client. So the more you're able to ask questions of the people that you're negotiating with, and you're negotiating with 3 people here, your client, the other agent, and their client. So the more you know what's going on and you're not tipping your hand, the better. You keep your, play poker here. My cards are close to the chest. The person next to me is kind of getting lazy. And if I look over, I see all their cards. That's what happens with open-ended. Close-ended, again, there are times where they're appropriate, but in general, when you're on a fact-finding mission, close-ended questions don't cause a person's brain to engage. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Like here we've got, what is the bottom line price you would consider? Well, that seems like, oh, that's a good question to ask. Who do you know how do we know what the bottom line price is? You don't know what the other pieces are going to look like. So if we ask that question, they come back and say, oh, well, I won't pay a dime over 400. And then they end up buying a house for 450. And you go, wait a minute, they lied to me. They told me the bottom line price was 400. Well, no, you didn't ask the right questions. Because the question there is, hey, you're pre-approved to 500. What are you really comfortable with? Because what I found is that people often get pre-approved for an amount, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily comfortable with that payment. Well, I'm only comfortable with 400. Okay, so if I find a house that I think is your absolute dream house and it's 450, is that something, should we go look at that? How would you want me to handle that? Well, no, I want to see that. Okay. But if I just said what the bottom line price is 400, then I'm not showing them that 450 house. That is their dream home and they buy, making them happier than they would have been with the 400. And oh, by the way, I just made more commission. Stay in the world of open-ended. Close-ended questions, oftentimes, honestly, they're kind of lazy. Get creative. Make a list of questions. One of the things when you get certified as a coach, not necessarily real estate, but coach in general, is they have us write lists of hundreds of questions that we can think of so that we start getting used to asking questions that elicit more out of a person than something that's just, that doesn't cause them to think. We want people to connect here and then to come into their body and connect with what's going on in their body. Closed-ended questions, we don't do that. We go here and we it's autopilot. We want to get them off of autopilot and really thinking and connecting. Questions on open-ended or closed-ended or any thoughts around that? What and why questions. Okay, so this is one of the places also that I'm going to deviate a little bit from what Ignite says. So, so again, these are ways to stay in more of that open-ended question. And so what would happen if, again, and that helps them. What would happen? Okay, we're going to make this offer and they're asking 500 and we're coming in at 450. So it's an aggressive offer. What would happen if they countered us back at 490? And then they get to, you know, kind of work through what that would look like. We went at 490. Okay, so what if it's 475? Kind of getting them thinking. And it also helps, you know, how rigid are they? How much do they want this particular house? Now, where I'm a little more, why is a tricky one to start with. Be careful with why. Why can feel, if it's said wrong or even misinterpreted, why can be more of a, aggressive is not the word I'm looking for, a little more confrontational. Well, why is this important to you? Now, if you say it the way I just said it, that's somewhat confrontational. But even if I say it normal, if that's where their head is, they can pick up on that. So for me, what about that is important to you? It's a little different, but that why. So just be careful with why. The reason they're saying that is they want you to be able to get more information and to gather more and to keep it open-ended. So I'm not saying don't ever use a why question. Just make sure if you can lean more towards the other W's than why, you'll come out a little bit more ahead and have less of a chance for being misconstrued. The other thing I would say, come from curiosity is always a good one just to have in the back of my head. I'm not going to pretend like I know it. I'm going to come from curiosity. I'm going to keep a beginner's mindset, big ones. Because the second you think you know, with any other human being in the world, you don't know anything. Half the time, we don't even know what we're thinking in our own heads, much less what somebody else is thinking. So the second you start going, oh, this is what they mean, this is what they think, this is how they feel, you're losing the game. So stay in curiosity, be in that place of the more I know, the more I can help. And our job is to help people. The better you get at helping people, the more job satisfaction and the more money you will make. So, okay. So who wants to be, we'll do a quick role play. Who wants to be, I'll be the agent. Who wants to be the client? All right. Thank you, Corey. Okay. So, Corey, we're talking about making an offer on this house, and I know that it's really important to you. We've talked about it, and it's really important to you that you get the best deal and the lowest price. So I know you want to come in a little aggressively. I'm curious, what would happen if we make this offer at 500 and they come back at like 545?
I'm sorry. I'm the buyer,
You're the
right?
buyer.
Okay. Phew. I was going, that'd be great. Well, I'd really like to stay closer to 500, Jen, because my budget is my wife and I were looking at buying a new car, and baby needs new clothes. You know, he's growing like a weed, and we just have a few other things to anticipate that we need that emergency cash for. I I could go somewhere in the middle uh,
Okay.
of our offer and their counter offer, but I'd really like to be well under their counter offer just because of the eventualities in life.
Okay. Okay. So what I'm hearing then is, if they come back closer to their list price, you're willing to come up some from where you are, but you don't want to go all the way up there. More of a meet in the middle or meet kind of below the middle is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be preferable. Absolutely.
Okay. So that lets me know going in kind of, especially if the other side asks, because a lot of times they will, they'll be like, well, you kind of came in low. By the way, I'm no longer in role play. You kind of came in low. Um, is there any wiggle room here? Because that is a question that will get asked. Well, I now know that there's some, but if I had a client that I knew would go really close, I'd say, oh yeah. So, Corey said they've got some wiggle room, but they have some other obligations. So there's only so much they can do here. That's going to make them probably come back with a lower counter, or they're going to come back with a counter that still is higher. And we know they're not really as willing to wiggle on it. So it gives us more information. So I know that going in. The other thing that don't hide behind paperwork. I see agents go, well, I'm going to counter on this one term. And I'll be like, have you picked up the phone and called the other agent? Because otherwise you're going to counter on that term. They're going to counter you. Like there comes a point, like initially you make the offer. And sometimes there'll be one counter, like the seller will counter without a lot of discussion. At that point, if there's going to be a continuing back and forth, it really is a good idea to pick up the phone and talk. Otherwise, you start this paperwork thing back and forth, that if you'd had a 5-minute conversation with the other agent, you guys could have gone, all right, I don't think my seller is going to do that, but they will do this. I can take that back to my buyer and say, look, I talked, they're not willing to do that, but they are willing to do that. Does that work? Yes. So then we counter with that and it's basically already done versus counting with the original. Then they go to their seller, they counter back. 3 days later, you're all frustrated because you shuffled 10 million documents and you still aren't at a resolution. So pick up the phone and have the conversations and find out what needs to happen to move the negotiation forward. But that just gives you a quick one of why these are powerful versus if I said, hey, Corey, we're coming in at 500. They're asking, 550. Are you willing to go up to 550? Or are you willing to go up to 545? No. Okay, what did I really learn there? I learned nothing. I just know he's not willing to do that. And I will also tell you, and I mean, the joke is buyers are liars and sellers are too. They're not liars. We just need to ask better questions and we need to dig a little deeper. Okay, so I'm hearing on this house, Corey, you're only willing to go to like maybe 525. And if there's a house that it's the dream house, is that one that may be a little higher? And usually people are like, yeah. It is, I would say, statistically, buyers end up buying above what they thought they were going to buy. Not always, but usually to get approved for more, they come in thinking, all right, I'm approved at 5. I don't want to go above 4. And they usually end up somewhere between 4 and 5 just because they start to see what they could get if they stretch. And they're like, all right, I'm going to stretch. Yeah. Well, okay. You guys have the scenario in your book, but we don't have an even number of agents. All right. I do want you guys to work through this. Okay. Do you all have your books in front of you, so you've got the scenarios? Okay. Let me grab it and drop that so you at least have this scenario. Hang on, guys, I'm not sure what just okay. I'm not sure what just happened. My screen completely disappeared. I thought I lost all of you. Okay. Here is, I'm going to drop in the chat the whole thing, and then it's on page 8, I think. All right, so if you click into this, yeah, on page 8, you've got a scenario. Now what I'm going to do is give you guys, there's 3 of you. I'm going to go off screen, so I'm not making you feel like I'm listening. I'm not going to listen. I'm going to just leave the room open for the 3 of you. Pull up that scenario. I'm not going to have you go through it 3 times. So what you'll do is each person should either get to be a listing agent or a buyer's agent once. 2 of you will go more than once. And then somebody can observe and learn from it. So I'm going to give you probably 5 minutes. It's probably about enough. To go through the scenario and do a role play on it. And I know it's harder on Zoom. I want you guys to get the practice because I wish I could believe that you're going to go off and do this after the class. You won't. So take the time here. One person be a buyer, the buyer's agent, one person be the listing agent, and then one person is going to observe, and then you can switch and have somebody else be the buyer's agent, somebody else be the listing agent. So run through the scenario twice. I will give you, by my clock, it's 2:13 right now. I will come back on screen to kind of debrief at 2:20. Okay. Does everyone know what we're doing? Yes, no,
Is it well, I had to use the PDF that you put in chat. Is it 18.6? It's the scenario as you're representing to a single buyer, your client is retired, renting her present property, blah, blah, blah. Is that the one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
yes.
I have it then. Okay.
All right. Yes, you're right. Actually, I jumped ahead. The next one is the buyer listing. So this one actually you can sorry, I jumped ahead in the workbook and was looking at the wrong exercise. You caught me. So actually with this one, go ahead. Thank you for catching that, actually. Go ahead, and this one you don't need to break out. So just write down your clarifying questions and then we'll share them. Sorry. Thanks for catching. Okay. So just take a couple minutes to do that. The other one we will break out. But for now, take a couple minutes and do that, and then we'll debrief.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So it's page 8 on the.
It's page 6. Page 6. I jumped ahead. So it's writing down some clarifying questions for that scenario. And the reason it's good for each of you to do it is then you can share them. So you'll all get some new questions from it.
Page 6 here. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm on.
You find it, Grace?
Yes. Yeah. I did. Okay. Here I go.
All right, take like one more minute and then we'll debrief. All right. So what questions did we come up with? We've got the scenario just for those, if anyone's listening to the recording. So we're representing a single buyer and your client is renting her present property. Like any first-time buyer, she's looking to you to guide her through the process. The asking price for the home she really loves is $175,000. The house appears to have evidence of a roof leak, is listed as is, and is correctly priced. Your client would like to keep her payments as low as possible since she still has a number of student loans to pay off. She wants to write an offer for $155,000. There has been quite a bit of activity on the listing. So, what clarifying questions are we going to ask?
I feel like we have to start with like if she was pre-approved.
That's all. Yes. That is a first question for sure. And what is she pre-approved for? Because there's a difference between can she go to the 175 but wants to be at 155, or is 155 her number? So that's a good one. Yes. What other ones?
Or like how much? Oh, sorry.
Yep. Okay, keep them coming. The more you guys share, the more you get different perspectives. So this is a good one to be checking in with each other.
Like if because she's renting her place, so I guess she's really looking also for how much monthly payment she could pay for the home that she'll be buying. So I guess that's another she'll be looking at as well.
So you just hit on one too. Tell me more. Did anyone come up with any questions around the fact that she's renting? Okay. So one of the things in this scenario is, when does she have to be out of her place? That's going to be crucial in the time frame. She's like, it's September and I have to be out by the end of October. She doesn't have a whole lot of wiggle room. If it's September and she says, I just need to be out by the end of the year, she's got a little more wiggle room. Now, wiggle room comes in, there's two things there. She can be a little bit more picky or has a little bit more time to making offers. She also has more of an ability then to maybe give the seller a rent back or something that is a concession that she doesn't need the property as soon as some other buyers might. So that rental piece is a key one in that particular scenario. What else did you guys come up with?
What is the dollar amount you would be willing to spend on repairs to the roof or whatever else?
Good one. Now, two things with that. This is a first-time buyer. So sometimes they're not as savvy on thinking about that side. Sometimes first-time buyers go to the opposite extreme where they're terrified of any repairs, but sometimes feel like, oh, it's no big deal. Making sure that they understand what that actually is going to look like and what those kind of things cost. So I love that question. What else? What other questions?
Yeah, a lot of what I kept thinking about was going back to the roof repair, because if she is a first-time buyer, and it's listed as is, to me, it's interpreting that the seller is not willing to fix the roof. So she's going to have to come up with that, whether that's, and if she's getting financing, it's not going to be financed without a roof being fixed.
Exactly.
Yeah, so there's a lot of
that's gonna impact. And again,
Mhm.
going back to what Grace had said, not only what is she qualified for, but what type of financing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I almost started going down a rabbit hole. I'm like, nope, that's not what this class is for. Um,
This class is for, if it's not too deep of a rabbit hole, I can still answer questions at least.
well, I just know that FHA wouldn't qualify for FHA if it has a leaky roof
Exactly. So
or chip paint or anything else. So there's a lot of things that.
So let's say she goes, I don't have any money.
She what?
Let's say she says, oh, well, if they're not willing to do the roof, I don't have, you tell her it's going to be probably about $15,000 to do the roof. Oh, okay. So now you're negotiating with your client because we're saying, okay.
Well, there's also going back to her pre-approval and how much is she pre-approved for? And obviously she's more payment driven than anything is what I'm reading. So is there a possibility of rolling her student loan debt into her loan if she was pre-approved for, let's say she was pre-approved for 250, and the house appraises for 180.
I see where you're going and I like it.
She offers 155 and she only goes 12,000.
It's a good idea.
I mean, if she has equity built in there, she has a possibility of being able to roll some of that debt together, maintaining her payment level that she's comfortable with. And she no longer has to make two different payments. It's just into one.
So with that, you could potentially, you wouldn't be able to do it on the purchase side, but let's say everything plays out on that scenario and then she gets in and she's got built-in equity, she could possibly refi and cover that. However, you went very deep on the negotiations, and these are good ideas, because the more you're able to get creative about thinking about scenarios, the more you can talk to the professionals, like go to the lender and say, hey, what can we do? It's why your lender partners are really important too, because you need people. There are times where people are cookie cutter, they fit in the box and it's great. That's rare. People usually need some navigation. So what you're talking about is great. And it could be, it's like, okay, well, if we could do something that consolidated, because maybe it's credit card debt. It's not this one, but consolidates that debt into one payment. Does that change how comfortable you are there? Or do you understand the tax benefits of home ownership? Because first-time buyers don't understand that.
No, they don't.
Lenders don't explain it well enough.
Well, and first-time home buyer programs are out there to have a much lower down payment.
Yes.
And everyone's getting creative these days just because we have it's so stale right now. So there's a lot
what's important about that payment amount? Yeah. So no, those are really good.
I kept going back to the payment amount part of things. I kind of got stuck on that.
So then you can say, okay, so Susie Q, what I'm hearing is you want your entire payment to not be any more than $2,000. If we can talk to your lender and find out a way to get a higher purchase amount, but keep your payment there, or keep your monthly outflow the same, is that, what would that do for you? Oh, I would love that. Rather than just going, okay, well, she's approved for this amount. She only wants this payment, so this is all we can do. Coming from curiosity opens up more avenues. And especially with first-time buyers, which is what I built my business on, you've got to be able to be more creative, because they don't always, sometimes it's like, okay, you don't have the money. Do you have a family member that might be able to help? Like whatever it is. But if you don't have these conversations, you don't get that information. All right. Any other winning questions that we have to share?
Well, and what you two were just talking about kind of ties in with another one of my questions. Another one of my questions is, how would you feel if the seller agreed to $155,000 on the condition that was an as is, you'd have to repair the roof yourself? Coming from somebody that had to repair a roof just a few months ago, I know that contractors want it up front as opposed to monthly payments. And so that would be a bigger hit up front, I guess is why I asked that question.
Yes. And this then is also where you can go to the listing agent and go, look, the client's thinking about coming in with this. We really need a roof. If she'll come in at full list, will the seller consider doing a roof? Or I've talked to my roofer, because oftentimes when a seller is as is, it's because they don't have the money to do the roof. I talked to my contractor. He's willing. Now we're negotiating with a contractor. So do you see how many police people we're negotiating with on this one topic? I talked to my contractor and he's willing to bill into escrow and have it paid at closing. Oh, okay. My seller would consider that. They just can't come out of pocket right now. They don't have it. Cool. Problem solved. Everyone wins. So the only other thing with that particular scenario is there's been a lot of interest in that property. So part of that conversation with that client is probably, look, I understand where you're at. We're coming in. I mean, in that particular scenario, they're coming in more than 10% below the list price on a property that's getting interest. So that might be where I kind of have a little bit of what I call the come to Jesus talk. Hey, we're probably not going to get it this early on at that price. Do you have any wiggle room so that if they counter us back, like in the middle, I don't want you to miss out on a house you love. So I'm trying to just figure out really where you're at with it and just getting clarity. But you guys came up with great questions. And this is why doing more of those and going, okay, if I've got a buyer in this situation, what are some ways that I could angle things and get to the end result everyone wants? So really good job. And I would just keep doing that. Think about scenarios that you've had happen or you've heard other people have happen. Especially new agents, because as new agents, we tend to have more things that feel like, oh my goodness, and we talk about them more. Whereas experienced agents, unless it's a real doozy, you don't hear as much about how they negotiate. Sometimes you see it because you'll be on the other side and you'll go, oh, that was masterful. But if you look at the things I was saying with the roof, I didn't go, oh, well, I'm only looking out for my client. I went, what's the solution that serves everybody and gets everybody to that result? Well, if the roof is the sticking point, let's find a way to deal with the roof. Cool. Contractor will bill into escrow. Problem solved. So, and the relationship part comes into that contractor being willing to bill into escrow. Because that contractor's done business with you or knows your client or knows the listing agent or knows the seller. And therefore, based on that relationship, they may be willing to do something they don't traditionally do. So just knowing that and being able to do it. So great job, you guys. Any other thoughts or questions or anything before we move on to presenting?
So when you say bill it on escrow, so it's part of the closing cost, correct? So wouldn't it be an add-on to the total listing price?
Yeah, well, so with that, what we would probably do in this particular scenario, what the list price is $175, she wanted to offer $155, but it needs a roof. So I go out, find my contractor, I come back to the listing agent and I say, look, my client's willing to come in at full list price if there's a new roof. Would the seller consider that? Usually they're going to say no. And usually the reason it's no, not always, but usually it's they don't have the money. That's when you say, hey, that's great. I actually talked to my contractor. He's willing to do the work and bill into escrow. So the seller pays out of their proceeds. Now, the buyer paid more. The buyer essentially financed her roof. Even if they were saying, because they said in this scenario that at $175, even with the roof being an issue, it was priced well. It's still better if I can go to my client and say, look, you need a roof. You don't have $15,000 for a roof. Why don't we come in at $190 and have them do the roof? That just allowed them essentially to finance the roof at a lower rate than putting it on a credit card is going to be. Even with today's interest rates, I would much rather have a client build the new roof into their purchase than charge it at 18% interest or whatever god awful rate they have on their credit card. So that's thinking ahead of things. And like Tamara, I love that you brought up the FHA thing, because if you don't realize with FHA that roof isn't going to fly, now your client's done all their inspections, they may have even paid for appraisal, and we've come to a full stop, because until that roof's dealt with, the transaction's dead. A lot of agents don't realize that on either side. You get into contract, you waste your client's time and money, and you come to the sticking point. If you address it up front, you don't have that hiccup. So by asking questions and really doing that homework, you avoid issues later in the transaction when people's emotions are higher. They're at the beginning, things are nice. Everyone wants to come to the same thing. In the middle of the transaction, depending on how things are going, it can get a little more adversarial. So it's easier to deal with things up front than to have to come back around. So, yeah. Any other questions? All right, let's talk about presenting. By the way, can you guys actually see my screen now? Because I turned it on and off. I want to make sure. Okay, good. Okay. All right. So we have done everything we can to get prepared. Now we're presenting. First thing, call the other agent. We kind of already talked about this, but call the other agent, listen to what they're saying, and like Tamara said, what they're not saying, because that's even more important. So we're looking for those things. This is talking about sending the offer to them, like, and having a conversation. In practice, what tends to happen more often is you're going to call the other agent before you make the offer. You're going to get as much information as you can. Then you're going to actually typically email the offer over. It used to be, especially in highly competitive situations, we would try and present in person. We would come in, meet with the seller and meet with the listing agent and present in person. That still is out there as an option. I haven't heard anyone doing it in a very long time. It's kind of a bummer, because what's nice about that is when you get to present in person, all the questions could get answered right there. You get to have a full-on discussion about points of the offer that the seller has questions on. You're not going through the agent. The agent is there and facilitating the conversation with their client, but they get the answer directly from you. Unfortunately, we don't do that very often anymore. So, sometimes though, sellers will want that. So just know, occasionally it's no, we want it presented. Okay, great. You just let the other side know that. Then again, listen carefully to what's important to the other party. Stay calm and relaxed. Again, when you start to feel your energy going into that kind of mode, take a breath. Focus on what your client wants, the customer's needs, and then give your offer the best chance. And I would say the biggest thing is, remember, you and that co-op agent are working together to serve your clients. It is not about you, and it is not about them. Even the most kind of aggro agent initially, if you stay calm, you will calm them down. Maybe not all the way, but you'll calm them to a place that you can get more accomplished. And those agents are used to having, agents who are consistently kind of in your face are used to having conflict. So when you're different, that doesn't mean you're rolling over. Notice I'm not saying give it away. I'm saying you just stay calm. And when you know you can't, you remove yourself from the situation for the temporary moment. So what I will say is, since we don't present in person, the email you send over is just like a cover letter when you're applying for a job and a resume. The resume is your offer. All the details are there. The cover letter is like, why am I awesome? And why is my offer awesome? And why are my clients awesome? Within fair housing laws, and I understand that we repealed or temporarily pulled back the law about love letters. They're still not a great idea, guys. They get too many ways they can go wrong. That doesn't mean in my cover email, I can't say, thank you for letting us see the house. My my clients, Susie Q and Bobby are highly qualified. They've been pre-approved. If they're comfortable with you giving their credit score and you have that information, you can say they've got credit in the high 700s. You can give the reason, they're looking to relocate because they want better schools, things that aren't too personal, but give them an idea of the clients. And again, you're thanking the seller. Oftentimes I will say what they loved about the house. If I know it, they'll be like, they're so excited. They've wanted a big backyard. They've been living in a condo. They can't wait. They loved the backyard. So there's something that ties it directly to that property, but it's not at a super personal level that can get into favoritism for reasons that aren't appropriate reasons to be accepting or not accepting offers. And then the highlights. What are the key points? Price, closing date, earnest money, down payment, type of financing, willing to do a rent back, credit. So the key points. So that as an agent, I can open that up and go, okay, I don't have to dig through the entire freaking contract to get my answers. The majority of them are right here. Cool. I've got 5 offers in. This one is up towards the top. I don't have to dig through the contract right now. I already know that. I can move on to the next one. Make their job easy. That is your first impression. Do not slam it all together and send it over with a, here's my offer. Not professional. This is your first chance to make that first impression. The other thing is, and this is kind of a pet peeve you'll hear from agents, it does make a difference. Attach your documents as one package. Don't have a pre-approval and a love letter and one document and another document. And because now I, as the listing agent, have to go in, download all those, put them together in a document. You've just made my job harder. Make their job easy. Make them go, oh, yay. Working with Tamara is easy. Let's go with her. Any little thing like that you can do. But the biggest thing is communicate before, let them know you're sending it over, and then send it. If there's an offer deadline and you're up against it and you're not going to be able to get it in, but you're going to be close, reach out and say, I know you've got a 5 o'clock deadline. I am scrambling, but I'm not going to be able to have it over to you until like 5:30, 5:45. Is that okay? Most agents are going to say yes, unless they've got an appointment with their client, like, at 5:15. Usually if they're due at like 5 o'clock, they're either meeting with the client at like 7 o'clock that night, or they're meeting with them the next day. So just know that. But again, that's communication. Don't randomly send an offer over 2 hours after the offer deadline and not acknowledge that you missed the deadline. That looks like you're not paying attention. So every little thing you do influences the outcome of the transaction. This is all part of negotiation, everything we're talking about right now. Questions on presenting? None? Okay. All right. So then positioning. So this is, again, kind of like, all right, offers in. This is where you're probably either going to have a counter offer, or you may have at the beginning, or it could be something on repairs. So first thing is, where are we already good? We're going to start with the positive. The seller and the buyer agree on these points. These are the points that we're needing to work through. Or these are the points. This is when you also can find out, no, this is where the seller is entrenched and they won't budge. So we can work around all of that, but we're not going to that's not going to change. So having those conversations. Again, this is where the what and how questions come up, because this is going to get more information from the other side that is useful in you figuring out how to get what your client wants, while at the same time, whether you're actually giving what they want or it's perceived, it doesn't really matter. Like, there are times where you just need to let the other side have a win. And if it's a win that doesn't hurt your client, let them have the win. Even if you're like, that's ridiculous, but give them the win, because then you might get a win on something that's even more, that's actually important. So where there's little things, let them have them. but you've got to know what the little things are for your client. You don't want to give away a big thing where your client's like, that was one of the key things. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Well, if you'd asked the questions, you would have known. And then understand it's a process. Sometimes it gets frustrating because you're back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That's okay. That is better than the process coming to a screeching halt. As long as there's conversation and back and forth, you have a path forward. When somebody stops and sits down and says, no, I'm not moving, you can run around in circles around them, but if they decide not to move, there's nothing you can do. So having that conversation with the client, on the seller side, oftentimes what will happen is an offer will come in, the seller will be insulted, and they'll say, we're not responding. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I totally get it. And you told me you wanted this house sold so that you could move by the end of October. This is a solid offer in all things other than I know that the price needs some work. If we don't respond, we shut down all communication. If we counter, we keep the conversation going. So what is a counter that you could put out there that would keep the conversation going versus stopping? Rejecting an offer is the worst thing you can do. It doesn't give the other side any information to help bring an offer that works better for you. We brought an offer. We obviously offended you. Sorry. Give us something to work with. That's the counter offer. Now, sometimes sellers will be so offended, they counter back like they've been on the market 60 days. They're on for 500. The offer was at 450 and they counter back at 495. It's like, all right, now you're having to have a conversation with your seller. I get that you want close to 5, maybe a little closer to meeting them in the middle. So it's that process. And then ultimately, yes, there are times that it's just, you gotta walk away. They're rare, but there are times. Usually that doesn't happen at the beginning part of negotiations. They'll walk away. I would say when that comes up, it has to do with repair negotiations. And both sides just can't find a meeting of the minds. You have to know, and sometimes you have to advocate for your client even when they're considering staying in. I'll give you a quick one of those. I had clients that had wanted to buy, they'd been looking forever. We'd made offers on acreage. This was in California. They'd missed out on everything. And we were in contract on a property, and it was on septic and well. And when they came out and did the septic and well inspection, they found out that the septic actually was not going into a holding tank. It was going into a pit in the ground. That pit in the ground was dangerously close to the well that they were drinking out of. My clients were like, that's okay. And I was like, no, it is not. I will not let you buy this product. I had to talk them out of it, but it was, that's an environmental hazard. What needed to happen there wasn't just a septic. That entire area needed to be excavated, cleaned out. Raw sewage had been going into the ground and seeping into the well for God only knows how long. Now, thank God it wasn't one of those where I need the mortgage payment, because it was the wrong purchase for them. You've got to sometimes be the voice of reasons for your clients and saying, this is not going to be good for you. Now, you ultimately still don't get to make the decision. I didn't get to tell my clients, no, you can't buy this property. I had the conversation and said, I really think this is a bad idea. This is why. I know your situation. You do not have the money to do what needs to be done here. And the scope of what needs to be done here, we can't even find that out without spending a lot of money. So that's the walk away point. Questions on positioning. Okay. All right. I want to see kind of where we're at time-wise. I think I'll make sure I can get through all the content before I send you off to do this one.
Well, sorry to interrupt, Jen, but if this helps you guys, speaking about my little guy, I gotta be out of here in 3 minutes. So
Okay, then let's do
yeah.
this. Ideally, that role play, it would be great for you guys to do it with somebody. I want to get through the content, so let me cruise through that and then come back and you guys do that role play with somebody. Grab someone in your office or grab each other's numbers and jump on a Zoom and do it. The more you do those role plays, the better you'll be when you're actually having to negotiate. But we will, okay. We're gonna jam through this. All right, negotiation tips. Most of these we've covered, so a lot of this is kind of circling back. Above all else, be professional. Take the high ground, always, or walk away, even if it's temporary. Keep your goal in mind, and your goal is always your client's goal. And the reality is, for most everybody in the transaction, the ultimate goal is a signed contract. So it's keeping the conversation going until you find that. Pay attention to your communication and tone with anyone involved in the transaction. This also, remember, when you start to get agitated and you share that with your client, the agitation you feel goes into them like tenfold. You're feeling a little anxiety. Now they're looking at the person who's supposed to be kind of taking care of them. They're seeing fear or anxiety or stress. They really go into, uh-oh, things are bad. My agent is stressed out. I'm going to take that and tenfold it. Now you're dealing with a situation that was already stressful and you're talking your client off of a ledge. Don't let your client go out on the ledge. Keep them back. The second you start to go into the emotion side of things for yourself, you lose power in the negotiation. Continually refer to your client's motivation when speaking with them. So again, what's important to them and why are they doing this, and reminding them of that. I think sometimes with sellers, that's harder because they get so fixated on, I need this amount of money. Do you really? Or is it more important that you're in Kentucky by October? Well, I have to be there. I have a job. Okay, so what are we doing here? And then also reminding them, like if they get with the buyers, oftentimes their list of things they have to have, reminding them of what's most important because they can get really unreasonable. So that's also helping them curtail their needs to something that makes sense. Don't reveal too much, listen more than talk, and keep your client's motivation close to your chest. Listing agents do it all the time. My sellers have to sell. I got an under the table thing this weekend that this agent actually handled it well. The clients needed an offer that weekend. They did not want to drop the price on MLS, but they were willing to take $100,000 less than what was on MLS. She mentioned it to somebody and said, can you share this with a few agents that you think might have clients? So I got the information. If my client had been able to pull it together, it would have been a smoking deal. But that was one where she got permission to reveal their motivation because it was helping them, even though it was hurting them at the same time. They needed an offer that weekend. So I don't know. I haven't looked to see if it went pending, but I'm assuming it did because somebody could have flipped it right like that. So, and then don't be attached to the outcome. You're not going to be able to get everything you and your clients want every time. You will miss out on houses. You will miss out on houses that you feel really bad that they don't get. The one thing I know, and I know this to be true because I've had it happen personally and I've had it happen with my clients, they end up with the right house. There's a reason why that one didn't come together. I am living proof. The house I live in right now, I bought about a year ago. I looked and made offers for 6 months. I did not get it. And then I got this one. And this, for all the reasons it ended up coming together as the right house, it's also $200,000 less than all the offers I made on the other properties, which, given where the market's at and everything now, that was a good thing. So you never know. So reminding your clients you'll end up in the house that's meant to be yours, it really helps them. It does. And I believe, yes. So I want, before we jump off, one aha from each of you and what you're going to take away and implement. And Corey, since you have to leave, go first.
That I just got to remember that I'm the adult in the room, and it's okay to walk away, even if no matter how badly you want a sale, or no matter how badly you want to close the deal, or no matter how badly you want to do right by your client.
Yeah. And I was going to comment. No, that was a full stop. All right. How about you, Grace, Tamara? What are your takeaways?
I think the same. I think being an advocate to your clients and just kind of being emotionally unattached to the negotiation part, so that you can really clearly understand what's communicate what your client needs, being unattached emotionally, and kind of being the voice of reason, what you mentioned.
That emotional detachment, I would say, if there's that would be the one thing to take away. And it's one of the hardest things to learn, because you care. And it's hard. You want it for them. And also, if you're competitive, you want to win too. So there's that aspect. It makes all the difference in the world. That doesn't mean you're not going to have emotions. You just get to go have them someplace else. Scream into a pillow. Find other realtors as friends, because there's a reason why realtors are friends. And a lot of it is because we understand it, and we can have conversations that we can't have with our significant others, because they're like, you're all crazy. And how about you, Tamara? What's your aha takeaway?
I think I've already really kind of talked about some of my bigger aha moments through this. Yeah, just making sure that I remember that I do have the skills to do this. And a lot of what I've done in my past is definitely transferable. And it was funny when you were talking about, being the adult in the room. It's like, yes, I've managed adults for many, many years. And it's amazing to me how it can go in a direction that was not desirable.
Yes, there are times where children are easier to deal with than adults.
I've learned how to say bless your heart a lot.
Yeah.
In my head and out loud when appropriate.
Yes.
No, I like the role playing. I think that this is probably one of the best Ignite sessions that I've been involved in.
Oh, good.
I thank you for that. No, it's been very meaningful, and it's been just engaging, and the participation involved really helped resonate it. So thank you for that very, very much.
Well, thank you for showing up and playing full out. It was great because all three of you joined in. It's hard teaching when somebody's like, you're just looking at a wall of blank screens going, I don't even know if they're listening to me. So it makes it a lot more fun to have the interaction. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, and if there's anything I can ever do to help, holler. That's what I'm here for. So
thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.